1. So, I can't even completely wrap my brain around this, Kevin. But when my friend Sage told me this story, I just had to get her permission to share it. She gave it, so here we go. Fair warning, I fear a number of IQ points may be lost in hearing this. Sage started dating Kevin about 2 years before this incident. Things seemed to be going all right between them. She told me he was a bit of a derp and sometimes incredibly oblivious to some things. He couldn't pick up subtle cues, and even suggestions flew over his head, with about a mile of airspace between his skull and the suggestion. She originally chalked it up to him being on the autism spectrum, as she said a few other friends who have had similar problems picking up cues. So she just switched her behavior from talking to neurotypical to talking to neurodivergent, and the bump smoothed out for a while. All was well and good. Then talk of taking the relationship seriously came up, marriage, becoming a family. That's when the plane hit the mountain with a cartoonish bang. Kevin announced that he wanted to DNA test Sage's kids, to make sure they were his. Kids who were 5 and 3 when Sage and Kevin started dating. Sage said she had to come to a full stop in the conversation for several seconds while her brain rebooted. They're not your kids, you know they're not. My ex-husband and I had them together before I ever met you. She had still been pregnant with the youngest when she and her ex had finalized the divorce, whole other story. Yeah, and now we're getting married, they'll become mine. I just want to DNA test them to be sure of it. Let me understand this. Do you actually think my children's DNA will change? To become biologically yours when you adopt them? Obviously, I just want the confirmation on paper is all. There was a long conversation about how DNA didn't work that way, with his rebuttal that adopting them would make them become his. Then there had to be a conversation that becoming his children would only happen on paper and in the legal system. That no, the children would not magically transform into his own biological children once the paperwork was filled out. Him insisting that everybody said the kids became theirs once the adoption happened. Her explaining the concept of adopted children are loved just as much as they were biological. And that was what that meant, him insisting that everything pointed to kids becoming theirs. His mom eventually had to become involved to back Sage up. His dad had to become involved to back Sage up. A few books had to get involved to back Sage up. Kevin was furious. He couldn't understand why people would ever adopt a kid if they didn't become the actual biological child of the people who took them in. How stupid and selfish it was for kids to retain DNA of the sperm and egg donor. How could any kid who wanted to be adopted refuse to change one little thing so they could have parents? DNA doesn't work that way as a bullshit excuse. He ranted, he raved, and right in front of his own parents, he told her that if the kids weren't going to become his, then the marriage wasn't going to happen. He told them that he would give them a week to change their minds and agree to be his biological kids. And when they stopped being selfish, and when the DNA test proved it, he would take the kids in. Sage said to me, and that's how the relationship ended. Wait, hang on. Was he just looking for an excuse to break it off? Did he just get cold feet or want to date around some more? Or nope, he really just is that stupid. His mom called me on the sly and very gently suggested that I just break it off with Kevin because no matter how she and his dad talk to him, he's adamant about it. He's even saying that he will never date a woman with kids from here on out unless they agree to change their DNA to become his if the relationship becomes serious. So Sage is single again, having dodged a tactical nuke. God help everyone if he ever breeds. 2. It was the first week of school, and the discussion section of one of my classes was meeting. The class, by the way, was a 300-level film workshop at a well-known research university. It was all about storytelling for film and had a few prerequisites that essentially made it impossible to take it before second semester of your sophomore year. Basically, you have to be really into the film track to be taking this class, and you should know your shit by then. The discussion section was pretty small, just about 13 or 14 people, and the TA began giving an overview of the class, then said, We're going to watch a few shorts. Pay attention to how the plot is developed, explored, and resolved in just a few minutes. Nothing out of the ordinary there. Enter Kavina. Her hand shoots up and says, "What's a short? Is that like a trailer?" I don't think I even need to explain how baffled the TA was by that question. But hey, maybe it was an off day for Kavina. Cut to the next class. We're reviewing the guidelines for our first project, which involves writing a 5 to 10 page script with no more than 2 characters and only 1 location. Pretty simple stuff. Kavina's question: can we have a story where the character is dreaming about all these different places and people, so there are more than 2 people in 1 location but not in reality? The TA says no, the guidelines are strict. Kavina thinks for a moment, then raises her hand again. Can we write a script about basketball? This became a bit of a theme over the next few classes, as Kavina would ask the TA during class time some very, very specific questions. These included, how long should a film title be? How do I introduce my characters? What is good dialogue? What is a nickname for Chloe? Massive props to the TA for answering all of these questions helpfully and with a straight face. Unfortunately, the TA wasn't the only one in the room, because during class we all workshopped other people's scripts. Kavina's feedback wasn't always bad, it was just unhelpful. Take one script about a bird and a dog, which I happen to think was beautifully written and needed no notes. Kavina's feedback was, I think you should tell us what type of bird it is. Mind you, the script described the bird as blue, and also we're workshopping story and pacing, not bird species. Other feedback included, you should tell us what his job is. The script was about a couple fighting after the wife cheated. The doctor's name is too complicated. It was Dr. Garabedian. The scene reminds me of E.T. Or was it Wall-E? None of us had any clue what she meant. I don't understand what's going on in this script. Given us feedback at least 5 times. She also asked the TA point blank what to do if she didn't like the script, but also didn't have any suggestions how to make it better. Yeesh. Anyways, that's everything I can remember. Maybe more will come to mind, but for now, I hope you enjoyed the stories of Kavina, the film and TV major who seemed to know nothing about film. 3. A few days ago, I used one of those courier apps. I type in my info and the delivery address, wait for the guy or gal to come pick up my package. They're usually friendly and efficient, no issues until now. This time, though, Kevin shows up. For a sign of trouble, he calls my phone. That's never happened before. Hi, I'm Kevin from X Delivery. I'm at your door. He most certainly isn't, since that would have required me to buzz him in to access my floor. Nevertheless, I humor him. Hi, Kevin. Did you follow someone in? I look through my peephole, and as expected, there's no one in sight. No, I'm here. Open, please. I hear an aggravated lady through the phone. Tell them it's the wrong door. Kevin? Yes? Where are you? I'm at your door. No, Kevin, I'm at my door, and you are not. Have you checked the address? Kevin hangs up, then proceeds to call again. Ma'am, open please, I'm at your door. At this point, the woman at the other end is threatening to call the police. Kevin, please leave that poor woman alone, walk out and find the right building. I give him the address. I don't need to check the building, I used the entry code, the door opened, so it's the right building. Kevin, I'm now in my building's hallway and you're not, so clearly you're in the wrong building. I'm telling you, you're wrong. The woman you've been bothering is telling you you're wrong. And I'm not having this conversation all day. Especially considering I'm freezing my butt off coatless and my slippers gradually losing my compassionate adult veneer. Kevin hangs up again and calls back. Kevin? Yes? I swear to God, if you hang up on me one more time, this won't end well. Now I want you to listen to me very carefully. Are you listening? Yes? Good. Tell me, are you on XYZ Street? Yes. Lovely. Please walk out of that building and stand on the sidewalk. I'll find you. I look out and spot Kevin 2 buildings up the road. He was easy enough to find. The company dress code is bright red. Cue extra negotiations to get him to walk to me. Remember, I'm still in slippers, no coat on. Kevin finally reaches me, and the first thing out of his mouth is, "Why does the building have the same entry code as yours?" How would I know, Kevin? I don't live there. But two buildings can't have the same entry code. That makes no sense. You know what makes no sense? It's you insisting that I should know what goes on over there in a building I do not live in. He stares at me for a few seconds and mumbles, "Sorry I wasted your time." I did ask him if he was sure he could handle this delivery. He declared he was fine now. And that's the most bizarre Kevin encounter I've had to date. 4. This occurred in 1997. I was a news photographer, video not still, for over 20 years. The majority of that was at a TV station in a large-sized city. I'd been at this place for less than a year, so I was working weekends. On a Sunday morning, I was heading to work, noticing that it had rained earlier that morning because of all the puddles of water around. This city was a ghost town on Sundays, so I expected it to be somewhat so until a reporter came in later to come up with a story. I walked into the newsroom, which at that time was only occupied by the guy running the assignment desk, RK. I was about to take off my jacket and get some more videotapes for my camera when he told me not to get too comfortable. He had to send me out right away. "What's going on?" I asked. "I'm not sure. Police Watch Command called us and said they had a story." "You're kidding," I said. For context, whoever is working the assignment desk in the morning has a daily ritual of calling up all the local police and fire departments to see if anything had happened overnight. If it was a slow night, they would just say no and we would move down the list to the next one. If something did happen, they would let us know then. They never called to say they had a story for us. RK told me that a police sergeant was waiting for me at an intersection about 4 blocks away. I grabbed some tapes and drove over there, not knowing what to expect. The area that I went to was an older part of town that had a few railroad tracks crisscrossing where freight trains would normally pass through. The sergeant sees me, pulls up, and gets out of his car, walking up to me with a smirk on his face. I walked up to him with all my camera gear to ask him what was going on. He says, "Let's just start the interview and I'll tell you." Weird. Usually I try to get an idea of what's going on before I start an interview, but whatever. I go through the motions of clipping a microphone on his tie, getting him into position so the lighting looks good, asking him on camera his name, spelling, and rank. "Oh," I asked, "what's going on?" And the sergeant proceeds to tell me the tale of Kevin, the inept felon. Earlier that morning, Kevin had been driving around looking for somebody to rob, to support whatever bad habit he had at the time. It was an older part of town, but still had nice homes in it. So not a bad neighborhood at all. After a while, he finally spotted 3 men walking down the sidewalk. He parked his car and ran up to them. He had a metal tool in the pocket of his jacket. I think it was part of an old steering wheel club, that he was pointing at them through the pocket to make it look like he was armed, and told them he wanted their cash. Judging by his appearance, they thought he was homeless and started digging around for any loose change. The first guy didn't have anything. The second guy had a 10 spot. Kevin realized he wasn't making himself clear, so he motioned with his gun at them to let them know he meant business. The third guy finally clued in what was going on, so he pulled out his very real gun and pointed it at Kevin. As I was being told this story, I imagined Kevin's eyes bugging out of his head, a la Looney Tunes at this point. Realizing he's outgunned, Kevin pulls out his gun and takes a couple of swings at the men before sprinting back to his car. The 3 men manage to get a plate number before he drives off. They call the police with the plate and a description of Kevin. The car comes back as stolen, and the police put out a bolo for Kevin and the car. A patrol officer in the area heard it and thought it sounded like Kevin, since he was a frequent flyer in the back of cop cars. He decided to head down to a popular park downtown that was frequented by criminals, druggies, and other riffraff. Upon approaching the park, he sees parked along the curb the vehicle in question, and there's Kevin standing next to it, talking to some of his ne'er-do-well friends. Kevin notices a cop approaching and makes a beeline for his ill-gotten car. They start a short chase around downtown. Fortunately, since it was Sunday morning, downtown was deserted. They eventually end up at his place, where I am conducting the interview. Unfortunately for Kevin, there is a slow-moving train going through the intersection and blocking his escape. Kevin, in his infinite wisdom, decides that the train is moving slow enough that he could easily jump in between the cars and get away, believing he has enough of a lead on the cop. He abandons his vehicle and runs for the train. At the beginning of this story, I said I had noticed it had rained earlier in the morning. Apparently, Kevin didn't notice. As a pursuing officer was stopping his vehicle, Kevin was jumping in between two cars, slipped on a wet coupling, flopped onto the street under the train, and gets his left leg cut off above the knee. The cop stopped in his tracks, quickly spun around and reached into his patrol car to grab a fistful of the oversized zip ties police were using at the time as flex cuffs. He ran over to Kevin and made a tourniquet with them around what was left of his thigh. He called it in, and an ambulance and a fire truck showed up to stabilize Kevin and haul him off to the hospital. After the sergeant I'm interviewing finished his tale, I'm just standing there in a dead stare with my mouth open. After he confirmed he wasn't joking about the story, I asked him a couple of follow-up questions and unclipped the mic. I let him know I didn't need him anymore if he needs to go, and ask him where exactly it happened. He points to the tracks ahead of us about 30 feet. I asked him if it was still bloody up there, and he said no, the fire department hosed away everything. I thank him for his time and get to work getting some B-roll. After shooting for a minute and wondering exactly where it happened, I noticed a bit of leg meat wedged in between the street and train track that the fire department had missed. I got what I needed there and headed to the park where the officer spotted him and into the neighborhood where he tried to hold up the three guys to get some additional video. I make it back to the station where RK asks me how it went. I sit down and tell him the tale of Kevin, the inept felon. His reaction is the same as mine was. We both laughed about it for a minute, and then he tells me the next story I need to shoot. The rest of the day is rather slow. So slow that I'm told that the story about Kevin is the lead for the 5 p.m. news. Back then, after we shot a story, we just handed it off to an editor, and that was the last I heard of it until news time. I eventually go back to the train tracks to meet up with the reporter for the live shots. We talked briefly about the shot he wants for the background and chuckle about Kevin's misfortune. 5 o'clock hits and the anchor in the newsroom throws it to the reporter. He gives a brief intro about Kevin's adventure and throws it to the package. Pre-recorded story with the reporter's voice track on top of interview and video. I listen to it in my earpiece, waiting to cue the reporter when they throw it back to him on camera. Since someone else has edited the story, I missed out on the last bit of information. The reporter explains on camera that this was not the first time Kevin's own actions resulted in an injury. 2 years later, Kevin and another man got into a physical argument involving a shotgun. They were trying to wrestle it from one another until the muzzle gets pointed downward and... blammo! Kevin blows his right foot off. As the reporter says this over the air, I start saying, "What?" Halfway through, I instinctively slapped my hand over my mouth. I never did go back to look at the air check, but I'm sure it made it on the air. He throws it back to the newsroom, and the director clears us. My reporter starts taking off his mic and earpiece and notices I'm just staring at him with my mouth open once again. "What?" he asks. Let me get this straight, I say. So not only is this guy, through his own fault, missing his leg, but now he just doesn't have any feet? Yep, he says. Some people's kids. 5. Hello again, Freezer Crew. I've told a large saga about my older brother, Brotherbeard, and his neckbeardy antics, with my mother being a proud parent and my younger brother being a Kevin. You might think I'm being a bit mean towards my family, and I cannot argue with you. Hell, they might have a slew of stories about me that fit right with idiots in the wild. I don't like labeling my brother as a Kevin, that's too cliché at the moment, so I will henceforth refer to him as Entitled Bro. So, I am the middle. Both brothers are exactly 4 years and 6 months apart from me. Mother used to joke that they are her bookends. They both are basically the same, just slid down a different classification, with me being squashed in between them. Though Mother never thought about that. Ever since we were young, my brothers used me like a punching bag, emotionally. I used to give in and let them dictate what I do, mainly because I didn't want to feel hurt. Yes, I sacrificed my happiness for theirs. How well did that work? Well, I had a mental episode that led me to be hospitalized for a week to get mental help. When I came back, I started to stand up for myself. That is the main thing that I could think of that would cause my brothers to resent me so much. The most that was mentioned by Entitled Bro was the fact that I was a chronic liar. At one point, this was true. I didn't like being left out of things, so I would come up with a story that would be similar to what was being discussed. I was quickly called out on this, so since then, my brother called everything I said a lie. I didn't like people not believing me. So I stopped trying to lie and just listen when I had nothing to add. So this one time I was playing EverQuest, an MMO set in a fantasy world. In this game, the zones and where you would fight monsters to gain experience would be filled with monsters that would be suited for low levels, with higher leveled ones closer to the next one. So the new players would be running around fighting the lower leveled monsters, while the higher leveled jerks would find it funny to attack a higher level monster and run it to the new players, causing the higher monster to kill the noobs in one shot when they ran past. The game moderator started to get annoyed with this. Now, I did not know much of what these mods could do. What I do know is that their names are colored green instead of blue, and they can teleport to any zone and coordinates. This one time, though, a high-level dick was running or training high-leveled monsters on noobs constantly. Someone reported him, and suddenly a max-level player with a green name appeared in the zone. The mod waited for the dick player to run by, cast a spell, and this huge, rotting, elephant-looking monster appeared, ran up to the dick and slayed him. Then the mod walked up to the player's corpse, did a kneeling pose, and the player's armor started to disappear from his corpse. Now in this game, when you die, all your equipment stays on your corpse, and you would have to go and collect it. If playing a player versus player server, the player that kills you can loot your corpse. The mod stood up and said in chat, "He's been dealt with," and then disappeared with the monster. Now, I don't know if mods can summon monsters to kill players, but Entitled Bro called bullshit on it. Not because that monster hasn't been seen or it all just sounds sus, no. He said it didn't happen because I said it happened. If Zephyr or JJ said it happened, he would take that at face value. His words precisely. A couple years later, he went to an icy zone that a fantasy-style scientist was in, and we saw the exact monster that I saw the mod summon. So JJ and Zephyr believed me. Entitled Bro, however, said that I have never said anything along those lines. Broski, JJ, and I once had this paranormal experience that we all witnessed at the same time. We all ran home, of course. I wasn't as athletic as my friends, so they got home first. They started to blurt out what we expected. I do not know how much they had said, but my brothers were on the edge of their seats. I came inside, out of breath, and they all looked at me expectantly. I held up one finger while I caught my breath. JJ said, "Dude, tell them what we saw." I opened my mouth and Entitled Bro said, "Oh, well, if Railuge was part of it, then it didn't happen." And both brothers lost interest in the story. There is much more to tell. Just like with Brother Beard, there's a lifetime worth of stories that I can tell, including a D&D story. Spoilers, he was the DM. One last quick MMO tale before I go, though. While playing City of Heroes, Zephyr and I grouped with Entitled Bro. He felt that this game was his game. He bought the beta account way before everyone else played it, so he felt like he was the manual of how to play the game. In the game, the equipment were in the form of enhancements. You combine two like enhancements to increase the level of said enchantment. Zephyr and I got this concept early on, so when we grouped with Entitled Bro, he reminded us to keep track of our enchantments, as well as when we started the mission, halfway through the mission, and near the end of the mission. Our enhancements were at the maximum. We told him that, yes, entitled bro, we get it. Once. We got annoyed with him once. He then replied, okay then, I was just trying to help, and then left the group and logged off. Zephyr and I looked at each other and shrugged. More XP for us. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to A Cacophony of Kevins, episode 12. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories and sent in stories for use in this video. If you have a story yourself, you can find the link in the description and on the screen right now. That's kingofthecities@gmail.com, kingofthecities@gmail.com. Alright, and now let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. I'm kind of running on fumes here, but let's see what we can come up with. What material would you make a car out of that isn't normal car materials just for the hell of it? Like I would like a car made out of chocolate. It would melt very quickly, but it'd be delicious, right? Or a fish made out of dreams or something like that. Let me know what your ideas are in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.